Sitting down with me here at the booth is the special teams coordinator at Arkansas. He joined us before. He was at Georgia. He's at Arkansas now. Coach Scott Fountain. Scott, it's great to have you here.
Really glad to be here. Honored, excited to have opportunity to speak here at the clinic.
Well, Coach, like I said, the last time we talked, you were a Bulldog. Now you're a Razorback. So how has that transition been?
It's a process. You know, I've gone from being a Bulldog to now being a Hog. That part's been different, but the neat thing is it's a process. So I'm kind of in the first phase of that process. I'm over there, I'm working. We put our signing class together. Now we're starting to talk ball. And of course, probably the most important phase for me is to get my family over, which I'm looking forward to doing that in mid-March.
Yeah, that's always the challenge at this time of the year. So many guys making those moves, and it is that situation, right, where you're out there and they got to catch up with you.
They do, and I've always thought the coaching moves were really a lot easier on the coaches because you're getting in the office and you're working kind of the same environment. It's football, but the tough part is getting the family over there, and they got to go to new schools, and your wife's got to make friends in town, things like that. But the toughest part for the coach is just when you're there without them. But yeah, outside of that, it's been a lot of fun.
So, Coach, you mentioned you got through recruiting, so now it's the process of taking what you do and fitting it to what the Razorbacks are going to need. So, getting your staff together, getting the guys who are going to coach special teams for you now in this kind of situation, which essentially is starting from square one. What kind of things are you going to do with your staff to get them ready? Right now it's going to be spring ball, so to get ready for spring ball.
Yeah, so we start spring ball in 3 weeks from now. So, first thing I did is went out and hired an analyst. I hired a guy named Mike Kreisel from Army, so he's there with me now. He's full-time with special teams, so I'm really excited to work with him. I think he's going to bring a lot to the game for us. But also, the tough part is, we'll have 5 coaches on our staff that are involved with special teams that will be in charge of something. So for an example, like today I'm talking about punt return, those 5 coaches will have a piece of that they're going to focus on. So I got to get them together, get them to learn what to do in all 6 units, and then try to turn them loose once we start practice.
So Coach, as you're putting that staff together, and even at the college level, you don't have like a full staff of all special teams guys. So you got to figure out where are the pieces here, what are these coaches good at coaching, and how does that fit into what we're going to do on special teams? So how do you look at and try to figure out how those pieces are going to fit together?
Well, I go around and try to sit down with each coach, and I say, okay, what have you done in the past? What are you most comfortable with? What would you prefer to do? And you get a wide range of answers from, hey, I've always coached returns, I really enjoy doing it, or I've coached returns the last 6 years, but prior to that I coached the front line guys, and I kind of prefer the front line guys if you can make that work. So you just kind of listen to them, try to get the input, and then also you're going to deal with some young coaches that may not have done a lot of teams. So you really have to put them in a spot that you can kind of coach them a little bit on the run. So that's kind of where we're at, and that's kind of how you evaluate them. And then the key at the end of the day is your head coach getting all the coaches to buy in and making the priority in special teams very important. And that's something that Kirby did when I was at Georgia, and those Sam Pittman's doing here at Arkansas now.
So last spring I was out with a Division I staff, and they were new. They were putting things in. I had come from an FCS school, but a lot of those guys had not worked together. So we were sitting in a special teams meeting, and so they wanted to be able to do certain things. They don't have that film of this is what we've done in the past to teach kids. So how do you build that out? I know for them it was a little bit of what they did. It was some NFL film. It was other colleges showing the technique they wanted, scheme they wanted, etc. How do you build that out, that library?
Yeah, well, the good thing is I was able to grab my tape when I was at Georgia. Kirby was really good about that, and when I was at Auburn, it was kind of the same thing. So that's been a blessing. But still along the way, when you pull your film and bring it with you, there's bits and pieces that you miss or you lose or whatnot. So what we try to do is teach off tape at my previous school going into it. But then also we sprinkle in some NFL tape, because I think kids, NFL, college, NFL, high school, college, when they see that upper level film, that's where they want to be, and you kind of see a gleam in their eye and a focus in their eye to want to be able to perfect that technique.
Yeah, they perk up a little bit when they see one of those guys is out there making millions of dollars playing some special teams, and like, whoa, I need to look at how this guy's doing it.
No doubt. We talk about that a lot. Hey, you know, how special teams can keep you in the NFL for a long time. Now, if you're an elite, if you are the elite receiver or the elite running back on a team, okay, you may not play teams, but if you're not that guy, and I always encourage them, I say, hey, evaluate yourself. If you're not that guy, then you probably, team's going to really play into your role of how long you play in the league.
Yeah. So, Coach, you come over to Arkansas, and, you know, certainly coaches hired you to do a job, but you guys sit down and talk about this is what special teams are going to be for the Razorbacks. And I'm sure there's some nuances from maybe when you did it at Georgia, but, you know, what is that? What are you guys going to establish on special teams?
Yeah, we really want to play fast and want to play hard. And even more important than that is that we want to make it a priority. And I think when kids realize you can win games through special teams, that's when they're all going to buy in. Even your staff will buy in more. So, you know, we're going to make it a big priority, but we want to play fast. Well, you know, some people run no huddle on offense. Some people have to prepare for no huddle on defense, but they want to have their identity. Well, our identity on special teams, we always talk about is 1-11. The 11 are only as good as the 1, so we have to have buy-in from all 11 guys. And if we do that, we feel like we can play fast, physical football on teams.
I guess now in your first spring, you're playing from behind a little bit because you haven't coached these kids before, and certainly you guys want to maximize the time you have in the spring now so that you do go into August with something at least to start with. This is what we're set with. We worked on some things. So the process of just going through and figuring out, you know, who are the guys who we're going to start with and who are the backups we're going to develop, and then, you know you have the recruiting class coming in, but it's always, you know, you never know what you're going to get out of a freshman. So what's that process like for you right now with the personnel evaluation?
Well, the first thing I did was we put together a picture cut up. So basically we'd list specialists, and we would go in and we'd put a picture of a face, and then the next slide would say who they are and where they're from. So we do it with specialists, we do it with running backs, we do it with receivers, and it's really helped me, learn the players that we're going to be coaching. And I think that's the first thing. You got to learn names, you got to learn who people are, you got to learn faces. Well, the next part is, so as we go and we study punt and punt return, etc., we went through and we're watching the tape from last year. So we watched, if there were 150 kickoffs on the season, we're going to go and watch 150 kickoffs and then try to evaluate personnel that way. And then with the new guys, maybe a grad transfer, maybe it's like we took a grad transfer kicker for an example. I went back and studied his tape. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to study high school tape if they were not there the year before. I'm going to study the college they were at if they were grad transfers. So that gives us a decent feel. And then ultimately when you get on the field, you would try to do some station rotation to identify ability. And then we can start plugging them in the spots.
Yeah, and you know, when you look at it now and think about it, like part of this is establishing that trust, because I mean, you know, it's a guy who maybe is playing on offense or defense and has that focus on things, like you need to be able to trust him that he's not going to see or not even think about taking a play off or easing up a little bit when he's on a special team. So there's, you know, rather than just like, hey, we're going to look at your skills, you're good at this, that, you're the best one, it's establishing that trust about everybody doing your job. For you, how do you like to do that?
Well, you know, I'll take like Mecole Hardman for an example. A lot of people kind of know that name. He plays for the Chiefs now. And when I was at Georgia, he was a punt returner, a kick returner, but he also started on punt as a gunner for us. Now, but he also started at receiver. So he started at receiver and played on 3 units. And that's hard to do, but you know what I try to do is if a guy's a starter, try to get him on 2 units. And if a guy's not a starter and he's a baller, he's a player on teams, I'm gonna try to get him on 4 units. But I think ultimately, it's like you said, you have to have players buy in. So when you cut on the tape, they're not taking the play off. And that's our whole deal with, you know, talking about 111, can we count on you? And we feel like we can count on a guy, then he's going to be a special player. And then if you can't count on a guy, then you got to demote him and let him know why. But a quick story was, as a kid I recruited a couple of years ago, his uncle played for about 8 years in the league. And he was a special teams guru. He played linebacker, but man, he was great at covering kicks, all that. He made the Pro Bowl one year as a special teams player. And so he's with this particular organization, and he's having a really good year at linebacker, and he's starting to play a lot of plays, and he's on all 4 units. He said, I got to think I'm getting really tired. And he says, so I go in and talk to the head coach, and I go, hey, do you think you can cut some teams out where I can continue to improve what I'm doing at linebacker and continue to help our team? He said the next day he come in, he said, you're no longer going to meet with the linebackers. You're going to go with the punter, kicker, and long snapper, and you're just going to focus on special teams. He was so good at it, So it's important to know where you stand with the organization, with any team, and that was a value they saw in him as a player.
So, Coach, before we get into some of the topics you're going to cover here, I guess you did start at the high school level, and you get to go out and recruit and see a lot of high school ball. So, knowing what's going on out there, I guess the way you do things, what recommendations would you make to high school coaches right now so that the impact of their special teams can make it can be bigger than what they're doing?
Right. I think number one, it starts with the head coach. I was a head coach for 4 years in high school, and he has to put a priority on that. And I think if he does, then I think it will go a long way if he'll say, hey, I'm going to designate this coach to coach teams. And he may coach another position, but I'm going to designate a guy to be over that. If I was back in high school as a head coach, I would probably say I'm going to be over teams, and I would assign a guy to run it, but that'd kind of give me my spot with the organization. But I think again, it just goes back to prioritizing that, making it important. And I think that if you can designate a coach to do that, I think you'll see more value in that part of your football team.
About from the practice structure, I guess the luxury that colleges have is you got two sides of the ball. You got a lot of coaches, etc. There's a lot of high school teams out there who sometimes just because of numbers, sometimes because of talent, but they have a lot of two-way players. How would you approach that? What's the best way, I guess, to get what you need out of that while you still have those guys doing a lot of stuff with it?
I think what you do when you look at players, you say, hey, I've got to be able to cover a punt. I got to be able to cover a kickoff. And I would try to get my best players on those 2 units, on my coverage units. And then on my return units, I might be a little bit more watered down if I have to be. It's according to how many players I got in my program. But I think in terms of coaches and numbers, what I've always tried to do if I have an O-line or a D-line coach, because they play on teams, but typically not as much, I try to always free those guys up if you can. And then from a special team standpoint, according to how many coaches I had, if I just had a O-line, D-line coach, or if that was the same guy, then I think you got to look at maybe as a head coach being more involved in special teams and maybe just taking over and running that part of your program.
Mm-hmm. Coach, kind of to change gears here a little bit, talk a little bit of kickoff. And I don't know if you've had a chance, I know you've been very busy, but had a chance at all to watch any of what they're doing in the XFL now. Think back to last spring, it was the AAF, which completely eliminated the kickoff. They just put the ball down. They have a different way of doing it now. I think, my thought, I think I shared this on a podcast, is maybe not a bad developmental thing, as I've seen a lot of high schools now. I think the rule in many states is, at the younger levels, JV freshmen, you can opt out of the kickoff if both coaches agree on it. Mm. And I've seen a lot of teams doing that. I love that play. I think that the play is maybe got a black mark on it because of how it used to be done in the past, and it was essentially, we still had the flying wedge in football, right, which was outlawed by Teddy Roosevelt. But the fact is, when you look at it, to me, to do things right, you use your players right. I mean, it's a beautiful football play, and I would hate to see it become extinct. I mean, while I think there's some innovative things there, and maybe that's a way to do things developmentally at the younger levels, I like that play around. What are your thoughts on maybe the direction things are going with the kickoff?
Yeah, well, I really like the safety piece of it, where they've taken out the back end wedge double team. They've taken out the front line double team. You're going to see some guys that they don't want 2-on-1 making contact directly. And that one guy can make contact, and then on the front line only in college, the second guy can join the party late.
Yeah.
Back in, None of it always has to be solo blocks. And I like that part of the piece. I think it's like anything else. When you take football as a whole, they've done things to make it a safer sport. You think about the NFL, how you can't hardly touch the quarterback these days. It's the same thing in college now. You're not going to hit the quarterback late, whereas years ago when I was at Florida State, man, we were tattooing him late, So I think it's just another part of the game that there's certainly people out there that like to see, let's don't do that play, but that's probably those people that don't really believe in special teams. But I think that the part where they're making it safer, I really like, and I think it's something we'll continue to use. I think also the fair catch rule has been great in terms of if a team just doesn't want to prepare for it, they just fair catch everything.
Yeah.
And your answer to that is you got to start squib kicking and trying to cover that, but they can't fair catch it. But I think that's an equalizer in the game, whereas if a team doesn't want to spend as much time on it, they just fair catch it and take the ball on 25 and play ball. And that was always my philosophy. Has always been, it's kind of the philosophy I've gone to is, if it's over 4-0 hang time, let's just fair catch the ball and let's live for the next play. If you have a kicker that can't get 4-0 hang time, we're going to take it and return it out and have a good opportunity there.
That was what I was going to ask you about is, like, with that, how you think about coaching up when you want that fair catch and when we want to be able to go at it. It just used to be if you were certain depth in the end zone, right? But the hang time, I think you're right. That's really important.
Yeah, you got to try to get a guy that can get a good feel for that, So we're going to try to place our guy on the goal line or 2 yards deep according to what kind of leg we're going against, and get him to where I can trust him to make good decisions and play ball from there.
Coach, have you ever had the situation, because I coached kick return when I was at BW, and we were good. We were actually the number 2 team in the nation, all divisions. I had 2 freshmen back there who both had multiple returns in their freshman season, and we started off their sophomore season first kick with a return, and then I never saw that ball kick back to those guys again. So I had to get creative with, essentially they're taking 2 guys out, right?
Right.
How do you handle those situations when they don't want to kick it to you, but you still want to, maximize getting something rather than saying, for me it was I just took 2 more kick returners and put them in at the fullback spots.
Right.
But, what's your approach to that?
No, I think what you just said about bringing in some fullback. So what we've done at every place I've been, if you get into that world with a team, we do what we call a speed return. So we're going to take two of the back end wedges guys off, and we're going to bring in 2 more running backs. So in college, you got a little more luxury with all these running backs. So now we got 4 running backs out there that's a real threat. Also, we try to really simplify it. If we get anything other than what we were expecting going into the game that week, we have a now check where essentially the blocks stay the same up front and the back end wedge will make us right, and we just try to hit it quick and get it downhill. And I think you can a team can completely ruin you if you don't have a game plan for it. Mm-hmm. So I have been places when I was at Auburn, we had a squib return, we had a pooch return, we had a regular return. But I just decided a couple of years ago we're just going to make it 1 check and just always live on that check and practice that check throughout the season, and it makes for an easy answer.
Yeah, for sure. Coach, that takes us to talk here today, and we touched on developing a return before. It's kind of been something you've been known for. You're going to talk about punt return and talk about developing a returner and a little bit about blocks today, but I guess give us some of those key points you're going to share with our audience today.
Yeah, I think when you get to punt return, you got to play fast, and you got to find 11 guys that are going to give great effort. You got to give 10 guys up front that are going to give great effort for that 1 returner. Now, with all that being said, I'm going to hit on a lot of things today, but if you got a great returner, that solves a lot of your problems. But up front for us, we're always going to talk about the 3 phases of punt return. It's the start, the battle, and the finish. The start for us is what's going to occur at the line of scrimmage. We're going to talk about how we crunch at the line of scrimmage, our stance and how we crunch. The battle is what you're doing in transition from the time the ball is, from the time I've crunched to I've transitioned out, and now I'm facing the punt returner. That's what we call the battle. And there's 2 ways that we crunch. There's 2 ways that we battle. And then there's 3 ways that we finish. So what's important about finish? Well, when you're in the battle, we always emphasize peaking the returner so we know how to finish. So what is a finish? There's 3 things that we can do. We got a trail position finish. We have a finish where it's parallel going down the field. And then we have one where a guy just gets beat and he's got to go find work. And we give names to those. So we always talk about the start, the battle, and the finish. So I go to a meeting, I may ask who I may call my R5, and I'm going to say, hey, R5. I say his name's Johnny. Johnny, tell me the 3 things we do in punt return. And he needs to tell me start, battle, and finish. And then I'm going to go, okay, tell me about the start. What are the 2 types of crunches you get in the start? I'm hoping he tells me ear hole and face plant. Now tell me in battles, what's your 2 tools you can use? I'm hoping he tells me steel rod, tricep push. And I'm going to say, what do you do now while you're in the battle? I'm hoping he tells me, or he needs to tell me, peek the returner. Why do we peek the returner? He needs to tell me because I got to know how to finish. There's 3 types of finish. From a trail position, we work a rip through. From a parallel position, we work an arm bar. And if we get beat, we're going to turn around and go find work, which we call MDM, most dangerous man. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what we teach. That's what we focus on. And we want our punt returner to be a vertical guy. We want to hit it vertically.
What I love about that approach is 2 things as you were talking through it. Number 1, breaking it down that way into those phases, as well as here's the certain amount of techniques and situations you're going to face in these phases, really lends itself to here's how we practice this team, right? And then on the backside of it, same thing, really gives definition to here's how we evaluate play in this team.
That's right, we do. And you can evaluate, your crunch ability, your battle ability, and your finish. And at the end of the day, all that stuff comes together when you find a kid that gives great effort. And that's what we look for. But in all of our units, we're always talking about little keywords that you can talk about. So in the game, I can say, hey, yeah, you got beat. He says, well, I got beat at the line. Well, I say, that's great. That's okay. You get beat at the line. So there's no battle there. He just outrun you down the field. There's only one finish you can do. What is it? And I hope he'll tell me a rip-through technique. There's no need to ever quit on a play. I got to go play ball and try to work. And but in all of our phases, we want to give little keywords that are real simple. And it's so important that all the coaches are saying the same thing. I can't have one coach over there calling it one thing and I'm calling it another. So it's so important we're on the same page.
Yeah, I think what I've really liked in special teams play and I've seen develop really at every level, I think back to my early days, first learning the game as a high school coach. I remember we had a young head coach too. He was figuring it out as well. We just went out and ran reps. Very inefficient way to teach special teams because they're long field plays. There's a lot of running. You tire guys out really quick, so you don't do a lot of it. Now, you're just not effectively teaching it. But now, when you start to look at every team as here's our phases, here's our techniques, that doesn't need to be a full run to get things done. You probably cut back a lot on the reps because it's simulating those situations that they're going to face again and again, just like you would in any other phase of the game, right? Why do we not do all 11 on 11? Part of it's because, you don't want guys running, rolling up each other, all those things that can happen. But also it takes a lot of time to set up, all 22 and go, where I can very quickly in 4 seconds start really rolling through guys on their technique, and here's what you do, and we're going to get you reps, and then we're going to go out and do it a few times.
Right, yeah. So I've been places years ago where it's always 11 on the field, we're going to get a zillion reps, and after a while kids tire out and they're not interested. So we try to do everything in phases, and that there's never, there is a time that you have to put it all together and cover the whole field, but we're going to break it down into parts with everything that we do and see if we can get them good at that part of that phase of that return unit or that coverage unit. And I think that's really what I really have tried to do is 2 things. Take the running out of special teams, cut it down as much as I can, and then 2, do drills that can be competitive and put them in competitive situations because everybody wants to compete. If a guy doesn't like to compete, then football may not be his game. Yeah. So that's kind of how that's my approach to it.
Coach, the last thing, we touched on it in our last one, but returners, you've really become known for being able to develop those returners. What are you going to share with the audience here about developing a punt returner?
I think the big thing is you have to find a guy that you believe in, and so you have some coaches out there that believe, hey, I need, I just use offensive guys. They handle the ball all the time. They're good with the ball. Let's don't give that defensive guy an opportunity to hurt our football team. But in my dealings, some of my better punt returners have been defensive backs. But I think it starts with they'll want to. How bad they really want to do it. And there's a lot of kids that'll tell you, hey, coach, and he might be a great athlete. Hey, coach, I don't like doing that. I don't like catching that ball in open space. I'll be a kick returner, but not a punt returner. So you got to find that guy that really wants to do it. And then you have to convince your head coach he's the best guy. But we're going to do drills all the time. We're putting them in a situation. We may be working on that short phase of punt return at the line of scrimmage with a quick whistle. But we're going to punt the ball, and on the back end, we're going to have scouts or people in his face with bags, hitting on the body and all that, making it a pressure situation all the time. And if you'll do that, I think when we get into the game, they're not just catching balls.
Right,
you know.
right.
So but there's a lot of different drills you can work with, but the biggest thing is they got to have a commitment. So we're going to do our drills within the body of practice, but this is a position that requires after practice work, about 3 days a week. So they got to be committed to doing that. And if a kid's not, then I'm not going to use him. I'll move on to the next guy.
Yeah. Well, Coach, I appreciate you taking time here at our national conference. I appreciate you being here and sharing with coaches and helping guys learn the game. And best of luck to you as you get going with the Razorbacks.
Yeah, thank you. And we're really looking forward to speaking here today.